on Women Rise, call for proposals. The Women Rise is the women's health and economic empowerment for COVID-19 recovery that is inclusive, sustainable, and equitable. And it's our pleasure to host you here today. Before we start, we would like to do our land acknowledgement on the land where our office is located here in Ottawa. We are on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. The Algonquins are the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed and its tributaries. We honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory and uphold and uplift the voice and values of our host nation. My colleague Natasha.
Merci, Montasser. Bonjour à tous. Nous aimerions faire la reconnaissance du territoire en français aussi. Nous reconnaissons que les bureaux du CRDI à Ottawa sont situés sur le territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe, qui est présente en ces lieux depuis des temps immémoriaux. Les Algonquins sont les gardiens et défenseurs traditionnels du bassin hydrographique de la rivière des Outaouais et de ses affluents. Nous saluons leur longue tradition d'accueil dont ont bénéficié de nombreuses nations dans ce magnifique territoire et nous nous engageons à défendre et à promouvoir la voix et les valeurs de notre nation hôte.
Thank you, Natasha. Sorry, my slides are a little bit slow to change. Okay, some housekeeping items before we start getting to the substance of the slides. Please keep yourself on mute for the duration of the presentation to make sure everyone has a good sound quality. You may ask questions at any time using the chat function, and they will be answered during the Q&A period after the presentation. If you would like to ask a question during the question and answer period, please use the raise hand function and one of the presenters will invite you to unmute your microphone. The presentation will be in English, but you may ask questions in French or English. This webinar is being recorded. The recording and webinar slides will be shared later on the Women Rise website for those who are unable to join us today because of time difference or any other circumstances.
Alors, juste quelques éléments de logistique en français, encore une fois, et après, nous allons passer à la présentation en anglais. D'abord, nous aimerions que vous assuriez d'être en mode sourdine pour la durée de la présentation. Vous pouvez ajouter vos questions dans le chat à tout moment. Le chat se situe au haut de l'écran et vous pouvez utiliser la fonction main levée pour poser vos questions à l'oral après la présentation. Et nous allons répondre aux questions dans le chat à la fin. Et la présentation, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, va se faire essentiellement en anglais, mais vous pouvez poser vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Et pour terminer, le webinaire est enregistré. L'enregistrement et les diapositives seront publiés sur notre site web et vous seront aussi envoyés par courriel après l'événement.
Thank you very much, Natasha. We now start the substantive part of the presentation. Women Rise, as many of you know, is an initiative that started or initiated and funded by three Canadian government partner organizations, the International Development Research Centre, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. It is a $22 million Canadian dollar initiative and for research, supporting research where the three organizations are co-funding. For our agenda today, we have the presentation divided or the webinar divided into 5 segments. The opening remarks, we start with opening remarks, followed by background and objectives of Women Rise, a summary of the background and objectives of Women Rise, and then presenting and sharing the important dates and how to apply process for Women Rise, followed by the Q's and A's period, and then we have a closing segment. So we'll start with the opening remarks, which we have already started a little bit. My name is Muntasser Kamal, the senior program specialist, and my colleague Natasha, who you already seen, is a senior program officer at the Global Health Division of IDRC. And it's our pleasure to welcome you to this important initiative, which deals with a very important part of the lives of the population of the whole world, which is COVID-19, and specifically on the experiences of women and the experience of women in terms of their health and their work situation and the interface between the two. This is an area which we're very proud to be jointly supporting with our two other donor Canadian partner organizations. Because it's so important that has been so neglected in the research area, as we'll come to see in a moment. It's our pleasure to have you here, and we wish you all the best of luck in your application process for this call. Now I'll call on our colleague Morgan from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. Morgan?
Yeah, thank you, Muntasser, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who's joining us here today. My name is Morgan Lay, and I'm a Senior Policy Advisor at the Canadian Institutes of Health Research Institute of Population and Public Health. I'm joining you on behalf of a number of my colleagues who are also part of this initiative, colleagues from the Institute of Infection and Immunity, from the HIV/AIDS and STBBI Research Initiative, and from the Center on Pandemic Preparedness and Health Emergencies at CIHR. CIHR from its inception has been funding global health research, and we are always happy and excited to do it in partnership with IDRC and SSHRC. We're really pleased to be here today. Very thankful for your interest in Women Rise, and hopeful that together we can make some important progress on gender equity, and pleased to be working and offering Women Rise, which takes direct action on the UN research roadmap for COVID-19 recovery. So thanks so much, Muntasser.
Thank you very much, Morgan. Our colleagues from SSHRC, Natalie, are you online?
I am indeed, yes.
Great.
Thank you, Muntasser. My name is Natalie Hunter. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Senior Program Officer with the Research Partnerships portfolio with the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. I too am speaking on behalf of a number of my colleagues who are working on this from SSHRC's perspective. And I'd like to just echo what Muntasser and Morgan have both said. This is a very important initiative that SSHRC is extremely excited to be part of. We have done some work on COVID-19 on our own end with our own standing funding opportunities, but it's so important to be able to work with our Canadian partners and offer this funding on an international basis and really explore the intersection and interactions between women's work and COVID-19 on a global scale. So I'd like to extend my thanks to our colleagues at IDRC and CIHR and also welcome everybody to this webinar and wish you all the best of luck in the application process. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Now we move to the next slide. Hopefully it will cooperate. Okay, and now we move to the second segment of our webinar today, which is the summary of the background and objectives of Women Rise. As many of you know, globally, most women are employed in the informal sector with little or no access to social protection in low middle income countries. In low middle income countries, 92% of women are informally employed. These are some of the important conditions that existed before or made women more vulnerable, or women's health and work situations more vulnerable during COVID-19. Women make up 70% of the health workforce worldwide and are therefore at the forefront of the COVID-19 response. In 11 countries where sex disaggregated data is available, women account for 71% of confirmed COVID-19 cases among healthcare workers. Women-owned enterprises, another important segment of the resources or income for women, are overrepresented in sectors like tourism, hospitality, and retail that have been particularly hit hard by the pandemic and its response all over the world. This increases women's risk of virus exposure, mental health issues, and workplace violence. Emerging evidence from the UN Women's Rapid Assessment Surveys suggests that with families confined to their homes, men are doing more, but women continue to do the lion's share of unpaid care and domestic work all over the world. In terms of the response to COVID-19, as we know, there have been many national and global responses to COVID-19. And the responses have highlighted the vital role of care work and the important contributions women make in the family, community, and society. Experience from past health and economic emergencies has demonstrated the importance of gender-based research and analysis in the spheres, for example, of work, whether it's paid or unpaid, health, and economics. COVID-19 has identified the need to understand how economic stimulus, many countries, as you know, have introduced different economic stimulus packages or financial support or social protection, including financial protection for families and their populations. So it's important to understand, we need to understand how economic stimulus and recovery programs can include diverse women's voice and experiences, improve women's health, and promote gender transformative changes. As you know, many of those economic packages, support packages, were either gender blind or really did not, or were just basically continuing the same discriminatory practices, gender discriminatory practices in many countries and societies. There is a real risk that without effort to understand the immense and disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on women and identify policies that prioritize the needs and health of women, the worldwide progress on gender equality will be rolled back. And this, we hear this in the development discourse for the past 2 years. And this is, for this to be addressed, a full and equitable social and economic recovery will require evidence as to how women and their households are coping and which policy interventions can effectively support their dual economic and caregiving roles. This was also part of the impetus for, or one of the drivers for the UN Research Roadmap for COVID-19 recovery, which was launched in November 2020. If I remember correctly, and part of it is really, there cannot be recovery without research. There cannot be recovery without, we need evidence to support the recovery of COVID-19, and now knowing how long COVID-19 has been and how the recovery is not going to happen overnight. It's really important. The research agenda is very important for this purpose. Research to date on the relationship between women's health and work is limited in general, even before COVID, and even more so in relation to the informal economy, women in low and middle income countries, and the impact of health emergencies such as COVID-19. And this is why this Women Rise is really looking specifically in support of the economic response and recovery programs research priority in the roadmap, which is 3.5. How have recent economic changes disproportionately impacted women, and how can recovery strategies be inclusive and gender transformative? I think it's very important concept that you will see throughout the call for proposals and our discourse, which is the how to make the recovery gender transformative. This is really an important angle that we need to keep in mind. Specifically, we have 5 objectives for Women Rise, the initiative. The first one is to fund action-oriented research that applies a gender equality and the health equity lens to understand the relationship between women's work and health before, during, and after COVID-19. Second objective, support population and health and public health research aligned with research priority 3.5 identified in the UN research roadmap for the COVID-19 recovery. Third, support the use of research findings on the relation between gender, work, and health into gender responsive and gender transformative policies and interventions that improve health. Develop a global health researchers' expertise to conduct gender transformative research and research on the relationship between women's work conditions and health status, and nurture a community of practice in this area. And finally, strengthen research collaboration and learning exchange between researchers in Canada and low and middle income countries, especially emerging researchers in this area. For this initiative, we have 2 components. The first one is, we call it the Component 1, Health Policy and Research Organization, which we have completed, which was basically the selection of an organization to support certain number and type of activities in the initiative, supporting the research team. So the Health Policy and Research Organization, which for acronym we use HPRO, will be responsible for facilitating knowledge mobilization, strengthening capacities, particularly for gender transformative research and health equity, and third, establishing a coordinating hub and networking mechanism among Women Rise research teams. So these are the 3 areas of work or activities that the HPRO will be embarking on. This is predicated on the premise that, or built on the premise that research on its own is not enough to make to influence policy and to influence change. So generating research evidence is not sufficient on its own to improve women's health outcomes. Essential knowledge brokering mechanisms and processes need to be in place to ensure that research can be readily used by decision makers and relevant stakeholders to improve women's health and health equity outcomes. The process is for the selection of the Health Policy and Research Organization has been completed, and we will hopefully in the course of the month of April, we'll be announcing what is the organization, what is the name of the organization. Their duration of their this component is 30 months. And it will start May 1st, which is, of course, as you know, before the start date of the research teams, the projects of the research teams. Now I will hand over to my colleague, Natasha, to go through the next few slides.
Thank you, Montasser. So now we're going to be speaking about the component 2, which is the 2-stage call for proposals for the research teams, and the main topic of our information session today. Montasser, I'll just ask you to switch the slides for me, please. Thank you. Thank you. So this component will support research teams conducting action-oriented gender transformative research that applies a gender equality and a health equity lens to understand the relationships between women's work and health before, during, and after COVID-19. Each research team will include a lead researcher from a low or a middle income country, a researcher based in Canada, and a decision maker in at least one of the LMIC research sites to facilitate the uptake of the research findings. We encourage women-led organizations and research teams to apply. It's not the only eligibility criteria, but we encourage the leadership of women organization and women researcher. The second component about the research team The duration for those research projects are 24 months in comparison to the HPRO, which has a little bit more time to actually work with the outputs of the projects. The value for this component is 20 million Canadian dollars. It's enough to support approximately 20 research teams. And of this 20 million Canadian dollars, we have 16 million that is available to fund research projects that are generally relevant to the objectives and the scope of the call. We have 1 million that is particularly dedicated to projects that are relevant to the infectious disease research area, which is described in the call and below in this presentation. We have 1 million that is specific to research relevant to HIV, AIDS, STBBI research area. And finally, 2 million that is available to fund research that is specifically relevant to the pandemics and other health emergencies research area. So for the general call, the research themes are the following. So we welcome epidemiological studies, population health research, and intervention and implementation research. We won't go through all the details here, but they're available in the call document, and you'll have access to those slides later as well. For the specific research areas, again, they are described in detail in the call. I may just speak to them briefly, but for infectious disease research, it's focused on women's work and health that have been shaped by and are shaping disruptions to infectious disease preventions and immunization programs. For HIV/AIDS and STBBI, it's for women living with HIV/AIDS. COVID-19 has the related disruptions to HIV and STBBI prevention and care services, and also for women that are in occupations that put them at an increased risk of HIV and STBBI. For pandemics and other health emergencies, it's on how COVID-19 can inform, improve, safeguard women's health and its socioeconomic well-being against future health emergencies, including infectious pandemics, environmental disasters, and large-scale acute events. Now, what's in scope and out of scope? In scope, various quantitative and qualitative methodologies of research are acceptable: desk reviews, exploratory studies, intervention research, implementation research, comparative research. Multidisciplinary research teams and studies that apply novel approaches from across the health and social sciences are encouraged. What is out of scope? Anything that is basic science, biomedical, single discipline research with no interdisciplinary research questions and clear methodologies to advance knowledge about the dual link between paid and unpaid work and women's health status. Finally, applications must demonstrate how they align with the Canadian Coalition for Global Health Research principles for global health research, which we describe a bit here in this slide. So there are 6 main principles: authentic partnering, inclusion, shared benefit, commitment to the future, responsiveness to the causes of inequities, humility with a broad lens, broad equity lens. You can find more information through the link here, and in the call it's also linked. Yes, and finally, for this section, we have listed here all the eligible countries for this research team's component. They're available as well in the call, so please pay particular attention to those. Back to you, Montasser. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Now we come to the third segment of our presentation today, of our webinar today, which is about important dates and how to apply. And we just want to, sorry, to see, so as you know, in the call for proposal, we have, for proposals, we have an eligibility criteria. The eligibility criteria we have is really about the mostly about the team composition and the organizations that can apply. So the team composition, there has to be a principal investigator who's an LMIC researcher. I won't go through the word for word because this is available in the call itself, and there's nothing new added here. But just to reiterate, so the principal investigator is an LMIC researcher based in LMIC, a lead applicant organization. There needs to be a Canada-based co-principal investigator affiliated with a Canadian post-secondary institution or affiliated institutions, or an individual affiliated with Indigenous non-government organizations in Canada with research and knowledge translation mandate. The third member of the team is the lead team is the decision maker, co-principal investigator, who's based in the same country as the lead applicant organization or in a country where the research will take place. We have received some questions to say, if I'm doing research in multiple countries, if research activities are taking place in multiple countries, will I need a decision maker from each of those countries? And the answer is yes. For countries where where research activities will take place, there will need to be a decision maker. The decision maker is typically someone with senior responsibilities in the government, whose role is relevant for the proposed research, and there needs to be a demonstration of buy-in and support for the research activities from the decision maker. Of course, the idea is this is not meant to make designed to just make life difficult. It's actually designed to make sure that to help make sure that the research uptake in the government or in the entities where the decision maker is located, with the idea of really influencing change and producing longer term sustainable change from when the decision makers are strongly involved from the beginning. For applications involving Indigenous communities, the research team must include at least one member who self-identified as Indigenous and provide evidence of having meaningful and culturally safe involvement with Indigenous people in the Indigenous health research environment. Again, the details of the text are in the call for proposals, but this is in terms of the team itself. In terms of the organizations, the eligibility criteria for the organizations, as we said, there needs to be a lead applicant organization, which is based in an eligible low and middle income country, which the countries are listed in Annex 1, and Natasha just shown those countries, with independent legal status and eligible to conduct and coordinate independent research and allowing researchers to publish without institutional restrictions. For the Canadian co-applicant organization, and we received also some questions to say, can there be more than one Canadian co-applicant organization? And the answer is no, there can only be one Canadian co-applicant organization. Other Canadian organizations can be third-party organizations, which we can come to later on, which we'll come to later on. So the Canadian co-applicant organization is a Canadian post-secondary institution and/or affiliated institutions, and of course have a legal corporate registration in Canada, capable of contracting and carrying out different granting and financial and administrative duties and obligations. The research teams, the research teams can include, so these are optional, can include additional LMIC co-applicant organizations or third-party organizations. And you can find those in the call, more details on this on the call and in the frequently asked questions, and we can come back to that in the Q&A segment of this webinar. At least one of the applicant organizations, the lead applicant organization or the Canadian co-applicant organization or the LMIC co-applicant organizations must have a key corporate objective to carry out independent research. In terms of applying a stage for this, what we call the stage 1, which is for the concept notes for applying, submitting concept notes. To complete your application, you must submit your concept note online through the SurveyMonkey application platform, and that link is in the call for proposals. We cannot accept applications by email for this call. So please follow the SurveyMonkey link in the call for proposals. Teams that have their concept notes accepted will be invited to submit a full proposal and will also be required to take part in a virtual proposal strengthening workshop. So we have the call, as you may have seen already from the call document, divided into 2 stages. Stage 1 is the call for this call for concept notes. Those that will be invited to submit full proposals will be going through a proposal strengthening workshop, as well as then reapplying or submitting full proposals. That tentative date for that proposal strengthening workshop is actually the week of May 30th, and it is obligatory for those who are invited to the workshop and to submit full proposals to take part in that workshop. The required application details to be submitted through the online platform, and those are explained in detail in the call document. Include the research summary and lead applicant information, list of all LMIC co-applicant organizations and/or third-party organizations, concept note content, and then additional documents that are listed in the call document. Each research team will submit 1 unified application accompanied by 2 separate budgets for the full proposals for the LMIC and the Canada components. The process, the review process, just to kind of give you a sense of how what will happen after your concept notes are, so you submit your concept notes. There will be a relevance review to make sure that the applications are of all the applications, to make sure that they are in line with the objectives of Women Rise and the research themes, types, and special research areas. So that will be done first, and then those relevant applications that are deemed relevant will be evaluated by an external, will be checking the eligibility, double checking the eligibility criteria, that the applications meet the eligibility criteria, and then those that meet both the relevance review and the eligibility criteria will be evaluated by an external scientific review committee composed of international and multidisciplinary experts. And the review process, many of you who are familiar with CIHR's review process will be familiar with this. So the process will, the review process will rely on the well-established principles and policies of fairness, confidentiality, transparency, and absence of conflict of interest. The top successful applicants will be invited to submit the full proposal, and an invitation to submit a full proposal is not a guarantee of funding, but it is a filter through which a smaller number of applications will be invited to submit full proposals for final selection of the cohort of projects. Only those invited to participate in proposal strengthening workshop and invited to submit full applications will receive summary feedback from the SRC evaluation, the scientific review committee. Others will be notified of the outcome. This is the this is, and again, I won't go through the details of this. This is already listed in the call for proposals, but just to summarize, we have 6 areas for 6 criteria, each with certain sub items for based on which the proposals will be evaluated. I'll just highlight here one of the areas that I mentioned at the start of the presentation that is really very important for this call for special attention, which is the gender equality and inclusion. I won't go through the busy slide. This is all listed in the call for proposals itself. It's just really emphasizing it here because, as I said, it's really important to demonstrate the extent to which the applications or the research proposal will undertake gender transformative research approaches and embed health equity considerations throughout the study design. And then, of course, for research projects involving Indigenous communities, the extent to which the proposed project recognizes the rights of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous self-determination and self-governance. And here are some very useful links for that are relevant for this particular point. The dates are also listed in the call for proposals. The deadline, of course, is April 12th. And we are hoping that and aiming for the applicants to be notified of the result of the call of this stage 1 of the call by May 27th, which would be just a week before the start of the proposal strengthening workshop. And then there are other dates for the full proposal and funding start date, which are explained here, which are presented here and explained in the call for proposals. We're including some links. Many of you have seen these links. They're all on our on the the Women Rise web page. There's the Women Rise web page. There's the funding page on IDRC website, which is linked to our funding partners as well. There is the link, of course, to the two-stage call for proposals and the frequently asked questions. The frequently asked questions are we will have some updates on we have already some updates on the basis of some questions that we have received, and based on today's webinar, we'll be updating those questions. So please keep an eye on that link in particular because it will be updated. The partnership tool, I think many of you have seen it, benefited from it, hopefully. It is a voluntary tool for for anyone who's interested in finding partners, whether from LMIC countries or researchers or from Canadian or Canada-based researchers to just have a way to connect and meet and understand each other's interests and for potential collaboration. And of course, there is the link to the UN research roadmap for COVID-19 recovery, which is also in the call for proposals. Now we come to the last segment of the other segment, the big segment of this webinar, which is really your chance to ask questions and for us hopefully to give you answers or responses now or after the webinar. I'll stop sharing the slide so I can actually see the screen. And so the floor is open. Please, as we mentioned at the start, feel free to raise your hand or ask in the chat. Just again, for those who may not be familiar with Teams, if you want to raise your hand, on top of the screen, there is kind of an icon that says reactions. If you hover around it, then it shows a hand, and if you click the hand, then you will be, you can raise your hand. I see three hands are up. So let's start with, okay, now 3, okay. They're changing 2 or 3. Okay, let's start with the first 3 hands that we have, and and then we'll go to the chat and then just kind of like go a little bit back and forth. Again, feel free to ask your question in English or French in the when you raise your hand or in the chat. I have Josiah as the first hands up. So please come in. Josiah, Kenya, it says Josiah, Kenya gender budget. Are you ready? Okay, if Josiah is not ready, maybe we go to Dr. Precious Barnes.
Hello.
Josiah, okay, is that you, I think, correct?
This is Dr. Precious Barnes.
Sorry, can you say again?
Dr.
Precious Barnes.
Okay, I'm just going, oh, okay, Dr. Precious Barnes. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Precious Barnes, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the explanation of the whole rising women. I'm from Ghana and I'm a lecturer at University of Cape Coast in Ghana. And as at now, I don't have any team. So I want to know if I can join a team so that together we prepare the proposal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Precious. This is a question. Maybe I'll just respond to the question. If some of them are easy enough to answer. Dr. Precious, I think the best approach for you is to really check the partnership tool, add your name to it if it's not already there, and maybe go through already some of those that have indicated that have added their names in the partnership tool. This is probably your best bet or shortcut to find hopefully some potential partnerships or teams to join, or people who are interested to be part of teams through that tool. We unfortunately cannot really make the connection or the connecting between teams, but this is precisely the purpose for that tool, is for people to find potential partners. I would go to, and so please, if those who whose questions are responded, please lower your hands so just we can make sure that we have keep count of whose turn is to ask questions. The next one is Pauline.
Good afternoon. My name is Pauline from Kenya. We want to respond to the call, but I wanted to find out with regard to funding, are you going to fund purchase of laboratory equipment?
That is a good question, Pauline. I will, if it is part of the research projects, but let me actually check. Will my colleague, I'll just check to see if Will, our colleague, is on the call. Will, are you on the call?
I'm here. Good morning good afternoon, and good evening to everyone.
Hi, Will. From a grant administration perspective, do you have an answer to that point?
My understanding, if it is necessary for the project, we actually could cover equipment, like what we call capital equipment, which is anything over 5,000 Canadian dollars. However, the percentage of equipment within the budget, it actually indicates what's the maximum allowed. But it has to be a real, justification why is it required for the project.
Thank you very much, Will. So, Pauline, you have answered. It is allowed within a certain limit, but of course, it also needs to be well justified in terms of the activities or the research activities. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then the last question for this round from the raised hands is Claudia.
Hi, Montserrat. Thank you so much. It's very good presentation. Just we have a question. We are facing some challenge regarding to looking for a researcher in Canada. We wonder if we can to move and looking for something here in Mexico. It is possible?
Thank you. Sorry, the screen name shows as Claudia, so I'm sorry, but anyway, thank you very much for your question. It is part of the eligibility to have a Canada-based co-applicant organization. So there cannot be a substitute for that. However, as I mentioned, there are a couple of advice which we can only give advice. Really, we cannot connect. We cannot recommend anyone. One is the partnership tool, to just keep an eye on that. Again, you might find some potential Canada-based partners there if they're added there. The second is many of the Canadian academic institutions have global health programs or other programs, and usually they're pretty good in posting those research centers or centers of excellence or programs or divisions. And most of those institutions have a pretty good presence on their website of this indication of these entities. So this is really my only guess, is to just Google some of the institutions in Canada, universities in Canada, and maybe connect through that channel. Sorry, we cannot really recommend any particular organization. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Now we can go to the next to the chat, just to we're balancing a little bit. Cora, go ahead. Cora, our colleague who's assisting us with the call in IDRC. Thanks, Cora. Go ahead.
Okay, so there are many questions in the chat, so I'll go through a few of them in order. There are two about the letters of support. So can you kindly clarify the form of letters of support needed from all organizations? And can you provide more information about providing letters of support from ministries of health or other stakeholders?
Thank you, Cora, and thank you for the questions. So there is no particular form for letter or template for the letters of support. Usually, the letter of support come from the relevant entity that the entity that the research is most relevant for. In this case, usually it would be logical to think it may be the Ministry of Health, maybe, I don't know, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of social welfare, depending on what the research topic or the relevance of the research findings will be for. There's no template, and they usually are signed by the highest, preferably by the highest signing authority in that entity. It can be the Minister of Health, if that is possible. If it's not possible, then kind of like the maybe a level lower, or depending on what the relevant and partnership sort of arrangement will be with that entity.
Okay, the next question, can you expand on Canada-based affiliated institutions, including hospitals, research institutions, NGOs? Does the funding need to go through post-secondary institution, or can you grant directly to the affiliated institution?
Thank you. I'm going to sorry, I'm looking because this question was already asked a few times. So I just want to make sure so, an affiliated institution applies to situations where there is a clear and demonstrable link between the two organizations, often represented by researchers who are appointed to both the affiliated organization and the academic institution. For example, a PI who works at an NGO and at the same time has an appointment at a university would be covered under this term. There is also a list of, in some institutions have a list of, especially Canadian institutions, academic institutions, for example, they have a list of what they call affiliate organizations that are available on their websites. For example, just by way of example, and I won't mention names of universities, specific universities, but a university, for example, medical school or school of medicine, they may have a number of research centers that are affiliated with them, maybe related to cancer research, children's health research, or some other molecular, some technology research. So these are what would be considered affiliate organizations. There has to be a very strong scientific research training, representational, or some similar type of relationship that is formalized and that fulfills one of those functions that I mentioned. Would be happy if you have a specific question about your institution to please write us on the Women Rise account, and we'll be happy to look into it and respond to your question on that particular question about affiliation.
There are a few questions about the Canadian co-PIs. So can there be other Canadian co-investigators apart from the Canadian co-PI? Do they need to complete the institutional profile questionnaire, the organizational charts, and the legal registrations?
There can be only one Canadian co-PI as a Canadian co-applicant PI and co-applicant organization. But there can be third-party organizations are allowed, and some of those can be Canadian or international or from LMIC. So, but in that case, they would not be considered as co-PIs. They would be because they don't third-party organizations don't necessarily have the same intellectual contribution to the project as co-applicant organizations. And sorry, what was the second part of the question, Cora?
Yeah, so is the Canadian co-applicant organization the same as the organization affiliated with the Canadian co-PI? And if other team members that do not come from the same organization as the Canadian co-PI, will they be considered as a third party?
Yeah, so the Canada-based co-PI and the Canada-based co-applicant organizations, they have to be, so the Canada-based co-PI needs to be housed in a Canada-based co-applicant organization, and there can be one co-PI, Canada-based co-PI, and one Canada-based co-applicant organization. Others within that organization can be part of the research team, but among themselves, there has to be only one Canada-based co-PI. And I think there was a question about sort of the institutional, sort of the documents. I think those are listed kind of clearly in the call for proposals. But if you have specific questions, you can write us on the Women Rise email, and we'll be happy to answer that. But in general, maybe because maybe I'll just add here, Cora, just because this was a question that came up in some of the questions we received. All the documents that are required in the call, please submit them, that are listed in the call document, please submit them. Don't rely on that you have already a grant, for example, from IDRC, and those documents were already submitted there. This is kind of a standalone initiative and partnership, and the evaluation process of it is separate and independent from other calls. So please submit all the required documentation that are listed in the call for proposals. Otherwise, the application will be considered incomplete.
Okay. Is it mandatory that the 3 investigators, the PI, the Canada-based co-PI, the decision maker, travel and attend the meetings? Is it possible for at least 2 to travel? Will there be virtual workshops for those who cannot travel?
Thank you so much for this question. This is one of the questions we're grappling with. The first workshop. So we're envisioned to have about 4 workshops through the life course of this partnership or this initiative. There's the proposal strengthening workshop. That one will be virtual. There is what we call an inception workshop, kind of midterm workshop, and final workshop. The dates for those are not determined yet, but you can imagine if projects are starting around October 1st, so the first workshop will be at some point in the fall 2020. A year later, probably the midterm, and then at some point in the summer of 2024 will be the kind of the final workshop. For the time being, the proposal strengthening workshop is planned as a virtual workshop. We don't know at this point, depending on the COVID situation and other things, whether the inception workshop in the fall will be a virtual one or will be a hybrid or will be an in-person one. We will know later on. And also, it will be required for all the, at least for the minimum 3, the PI, LMIC PI, Canadian co-PI or Canada-based co-PI, and the decision maker to be in all the workshops. I hope that answers. Maybe we go now, Cora, we can just maybe then shift to the, again, the hands, just to make sure that we're trying to respond to as many as possible. Okay, Claudia, again, I think, was that an old question? Sorry, the name showing as Claudia Morales. Is that is that the old question from Mexico? Okay, great. No, still there. Okay, I'm going to go on to Teresa Servo.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much for the presentation and all the clarifications. I still was wondering, I was not very clear about that. So there is the Canadian co-PI affiliated to the Canadian institution. So I'm still not very clear that if it can be the same entity as the Canadian co-applicant, or it has to be two different organizations.
Thank you, Teresa, for the question. It is one, and so it's one Canada-based co-PI housed in the same where the person is housed, where this person works. So let's say this person X works in an institution Y. This is one and the same, so they have to be the same one. So it cannot be a person, an individual is not. How to say? Okay, I'll say it briefly, or maybe make it more clear. Yes, the Canada-based co-PI needs to be housed in the same Canada-based co-applicant organization where he or she works. Does that answer your question clearly?
Yes, yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm making you repeat, but it makes it much clearer. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
And can I take advantage for a second question? So it is possible for the LMIC partner to apply directly on the platform, on the online submission platform, right?
Yes, thank you, Teresa, for this question, because it's also a question that came up since we issued the call. It is the responsibility of the LMIC PI to actually submit the application on behalf of all the co-applicants or the co-PIs. So it is the LMIC PI who actually submits the application for their whole research team.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa. Dr. Precious, I think maybe that's an old question, old hand maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe let's go to someone who hasn't asked a question. Taxal, Arati Taxal.
Yes, it's Arati Taxal, you got it right. Thank you so much. My question, you did partially answer the question. So my question is about Canadian co-investigators, not the Canadian co-principal investigator. For example, if I am applying through the Douglas Research Center, but I do want to invite people with multidisciplinary backgrounds from McGill University, okay, as the Canadian, as members of the research team. Does the person who is from the McGill University also have to complete the institutional profile, legal registration, and the organization chart, or is it enough if I do it from my organization, my hospital? Do you understand? Like, if
I think it's Yeah, so if I understand it correctly, is your as the Canada-based co-applicant PI and organization, do you need to submit only one institutional profile? Is that your question?
No. My question is, suppose I have expertise in mental health, right? But I want to invite somebody with health economics background from another university to be a part of my research team, right? And I'm from University A, they are from University B. So the person who's from University B, who's not the Canadian co-applicant, okay? Do they need to complete the organizational chart, the institutional profile questionnaire also? They are co-investigators, but they're not the co-principal investigator. What about them?
Thank you. I think there are two answers or two parts, a two-part answer to your question. I think the first one, and maybe Will can confirm that it is only the institutional profile will be required for the Canada-based co-applicant organization. Will, is that correct? Will, are you?
Correct, but it's also a question that can only be response on what kind of relationship this new person outside the lead organization going to have within the project. Are you going to hire? How is the money going to be transferred to pay for this person's work? Is it going to be a grant between University or A to University B, or is this person from University B just going to be hired as a specialist, a consultant, something to that extent? Based on that, that's how
they will like they have an expertise in health economics, and we want that expertise to strengthen our research, and so they will be an expert, a consultant, but we are not hiring them, because they are a professor or faculty at another university with expertise which can strengthen our application. Do you want that person, or do you want all these details from that university as well? Say, like I'm from McGill.
Yeah, so I think Will has the answer. So maybe Will, to that question. Go ahead.
So McGill will not be a co-applicant to the project, so therefore there's no need to present all their institutional information. But once again, when you present in the budget, because that have to be, you have to indicate where is this individual going to be. Is it going to be a consultant? Then it goes on the consultant. Is it going to be on their personnel? It cannot be on their personnel because it's not part of Organization A. So that's the response to your question. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hopefully that also answers some other questions that people have. Farah Khalifa, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. This is Farah from Jordan. I have a question regarding the additional documents section. There's a requirement of the list of current external donors and their contributions to the lead applicant organizations. So I'd like an elaboration on the contribution. Should we list the financial contributions or the technical contributions? Thank you.
Thank you. This is for financial. Thank you for the question. The short answer is this is for financial contributions. The slightly longer answer is just because, again, to benefit from some of the questions that we were asked since we launched the call. Some organizations, some big organizations have, list of thousands of financial contributors. And large and small amounts. So we leave it to the discretion of the institution to decide what is the cutoff amount or what is the cutoff number. They may, and again, this is a document that needs to be is to be uploaded to the SurveyMonkey. So no one is going to need to sit and write it, one by one. So that hopefully would make it easier. So for example, an institution that has thousands of financial contributors, you may decide that, this is the top 100, that who contributed more than 5 million, for example. I mean, you as an applying institution, you can decide what is the cutoff amount and number that is meaningful for you, or that kind of represents really the important point about understanding the contributors. But also you need to explain that, like just kind of explain, I have cut off at certain point or a certain number or a certain amount because the list is long, and just to make that clear. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe we'll go back to the chat just to, again, trying to answer as many questions as possible. And for those, please, whose questions have been answered or responded to, please lower your hand so just we can keep a tab of the new questions. Cora?
So how do you define the gender specialist in the scope of this call for proposals? And I just saw there's another question related to this. Should the PI be a gender specialist as well? What are the criteria, demonstrate experience and skills for this domain?
Thanks, Cora. We don't have a specific set of requirements in the or profile. The PI can definitely be a gender specialist, or there can be a special member of the team who's dedicated to bringing in that perspective. The important part, couple of important things. One is to make sure that this perspective is integrated throughout the research project, that this is not is not meant to be an add-on, or just having a section that describes kind of how gender equality and inclusion are going to be included in the proposal. It needs to be integrated throughout the proposal. We don't have a particular profile, but the profile of the person needs to be also a person who's imagine would be an expert in the particular geographic context, or in the particular topic of research, gender economics or gender and health issues, depending on what is being proposed, for example, gender aspects of labor. It's someone who needs to have for anyone, not just for gender experts, but any team members who really need to have the relevant expertise for the research questions. We also have in the call for proposal links to some of the tools, and we have an annex describing some of the questions and perspectives on gender and inclusion that hopefully will be helpful for the applicants. And also in the call for proposals, we have some links to some of the tools that are available on our websites for this, especially I think from CHR. So another question, Cora?
Yeah, so can team members be added after the concept note phase, but before the final grant stage?
Sorry, can team members be added, you said?
Yeah, can team members be added?
Sorry, the team members need to be, the main team members would need to be added, would need to be described or presented in the concept note stage. There can be additional team members that can be added afterwards. But for the concept note stage, a part of the evaluation criteria, as you have seen them, will be about the competency or the capacity of the research team to carry out the work. So it is an important. It's important to describe the profile of the team in the concept note stage.
Okay, and can you help us connect with a suitable decision maker in each country?
Sorry, can you say that again, Cora?
Can you help us connect with a decision maker in the country of research?
I wish I could. This is something that really is for the research team to identify the appropriate decision maker, and hopefully for the research and for their country, and to seek and obtain their buy-in for their project. So maybe one more question, Cora, and then we'll go back to the hands.
Yeah, so if the LMIC organization is a university, do they still need to present an entire organizational chart and a list of donors? And does the list of donors include grants or only donations? And can we submit a limited organizational chart rather than include everyone in the university?
Natasha, could I leave that to you? Natasha?
Yes, I think this was also asked in our inbox as well. I think we have that documented somewhere. I don't want to send anyone in the wrong direction. So we will go back and we will add that to the FAQ, because I think this was asked also from Canadian universities, because when you have large organizations with thousands of pages of list of donors, it may be difficult for you to provide. So we will look into this carefully and provide more clarity on that. Thanks. Oh, Natasha, you're on mute.
And for the organizational chart, Natasha, do you have a...
Same. I'm not too sure if we can accept charts just for departments or divisions. So we will also clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Natasha. So we'll go to the hands again, just to again trying to cover as much as possible. We have Agatha.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. So I have a question related to eligibility criteria. If we are an international NGO and we are not without a research-oriented mandate, and we are having legal entities in low and middle income countries included as eligible countries on the list under this call. So, and we would like to be a part of research. So should we apply as a low and middle income country co-applicant or as a third-party organization, given the fact that we are not a research-oriented institution? Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a specific case, so we'll maybe, Agatha, if you don't mind, to send us on the Women Rise inbox, and we will respond to you directly. We have a section, okay, maybe Natasha, if you can respond to that. I see, I think you added something in the chat, maybe related to this question.
I'm sorry, I was distracted by answering the chat. I didn't hear the question.
Ah, okay, sorry, so you're not answering the same question. Okay, so maybe, Agatha, if you don't mind, please send us today the question on the Women Rise inbox, and we'll respond to you, and we'll make the response available to everyone afterward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think, Josiah, are you able to speak? We didn't hear you the first time.
All right.
Yes, please let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am from Kenya, and I wanted to find out the relationship between the lead organization and the COPI. Can you give an example of the kind of relationship that they have? For instance, we in this call we qualify as a co-applicant, but we are thinking of having a lead who will be a university. Our expertise is in gender, so if we are looking for Canadian COPI, which in this case will be a university, what kind of relationship is there? One, in terms of the technical capacity and complementary abilities, and also in terms of managing the finances and the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Josiah. If I'll attempt to answer, but if there are any follow-ups, so we'll be happy to take it on the inbox, in our inbox. The relationship is really is that of co-ownership of the project. So all the intellectual and financial arrangements need to be sorted out beforehand at the point of the submitting basically a joint application. The division of the resources, financial resources, is designed or agreed to by the team or the PI and the co-PI and their institutions. The role of the role of each side on the research design, the research implementation, results reporting, publication, all of that is sorted out between the institutions. So it is considered to be just a really full joint partnership. But the terms of that partnership, we cannot really dictate that, but this is between the two institutions, or if there's more than one co-applicant organization. The second part to your question is, and that also comes with of course, certain responsibilities from each side. For those who are going to be invited to stage 2 for the final to submit the full proposals, there will need to be two separate components of the budget, one for the LMIC lead organization and one for the Canada-based co-applicant organization. So at that point, at the point of the full proposal, second stage, full proposal, there would need to be two components of the budget clearly delineated, but of course, based on the planned activities and the joint ownership. Okay. We're going to go, so thank you very much. Again, please, for those who has questions that we have responded to, please take down your hand so just allow us to keep track of whose turn it is. We have maybe one more on the from the hands, Helena, and then we'll go to the chat after. Helena, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Helena from Tanzania. So my question is there any budget, any defined budget proportion between the developing country applicant and the co-applicant in Canada? Is there any ratio that is limited?
Thank you, Elena. This is a question also that we received, and it will be in the updated Q&A, FAQ. No, we don't have a preset or predetermined ratio of how the funds would be divided or allocated between the LMIC lead organization and the Canada-based co-applicant organization. So this is really, it depends on the research activities and on the negotiation between the two teams about level of effort and division of labor. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we go to more questions in the chat. Cora, please.
Okay. How do we show proof of partnership with a Canadian co-PI on the concept note? Do we have to have a letter of partnership?
I don't think it's one of the listed requirements that we have, but by by being submitted, sorry, yeah, I don't think we have that requirement. We can double check to make sure, but I don't think we have that as one of the requirements. But if you will take it as I say, as a proof, if there's a joint application, that it is really on behalf of all the partners that are listed. But we actually have, sorry, maybe I'll actually go, if you don't mind, I'll just go because there is a section where we ask for support letters where appropriate. And let me, sorry, if you don't mind, I'll just maybe give you the answer because that might be something that others are looking for as well. There is a section where we say in the call, so we say, okay, additional documents under section, the section that says how to apply stage 1 required application details to be submitted through the online platform. we have four types of documents, or four subsections. And under the subsection of additional documents, we say signed letters of support from relevant government ministries or other key stakeholders where appropriate. So I think this would be kind of the logical place to add those letters of partnership or confirming partnership, or that this is on behalf of the partnership or a team, a whole research team. So yes, please do. If that I would say if the partners you're collaborating with or the rest of the research team organizations would like to submit that, I think that would be great. Okay. Next one. Laura.
So should the project focus on the general population of women, or is it possible to focus on a very specific population of women, for example, domestic workers, sex workers, migrant women, women with disabilities?
It is possible to focus on specific subpopulations for sure.
Okay. So this is somebody, if the research in Canada is professor from UBC, for example, what type of comment should I upload for this part of the concept note? So it's referring to the legal registrations or incorporation certificates of the lead application organization. What kind of documents should be uploaded?
The documents that prove the legal requirements for the institution. If you would like to, if you have a specific, we can take that. Please send us the question in the Women Rise account, email account inbox, and we'll look at that specifically if you have a specific question. Normally, most institutions have certificates of incorporation or registration or something of that sort, and that would be the kind of documentation we'll be looking at. But for this particular case, if you could, and usually the grants offices and those that exist in many academic institutions would have and would know the types of documents that would be submitted in this case. But please write us separately, and we'll be happy to respond to your question online and the email through the email. Cora, go ahead.
And can co-PIs be from neighboring countries, for example, from Kenya, and other co-PIs from Tanzania?
Yes, thank you, Cora. It is allowed. You see that in the, it's already in the frequently asked questions document, but we'll also update that. You're allowed to have up to, in addition to the PI, co-PI, decision maker, and possibly indigenous person co-PI, depending on the project, you're allowed 5 co-applicant LMIC co-applicant organizations and 5 third-party organizations. So, so in short, the answer is yes, but there is a limited limits on the number of co-applicant organizations and third-party organizations that can be part of the application process.
Okay, and when should the PI and co-PI go through the Gender Tool Videos certificate? Is this during the first stage or the second stage?
First stage.
Okay. Those are the questions I have. I'm not sure, Natasha, if you've been monitoring which ones you've answered, but those are all the questions I have from the chat for now that haven't been answered.
Yes, I used the reply function to answer some of them. So I provided similar answers or same answers to Montasser and some that he just answered orally. So I think you covered most of what is here. And I think we're coming up to the end of the information session, so we'll probably go to some final wrapping words. And just to reiterate that everything everything that has not been answered or that has been answered will be covered in the updated FAQ. And some people were asking when we will be posting that. So we already have almost finalized translated version of the update we made from all the questions we received through the Women Rise inbox. So that will be available in the next few days. And by next week, we should have an updated FAQ in both French and English for the answers from this session today.
Thank you. Thanks, Natasha. I think I can squeeze in answers to two more questions that came in the chat.
Yes, go ahead.
One is we want to apply for the single country. It is not necessary to have more countries, and the answer is yes. You don't have to have more countries, but it is possible to have one country or more countries. And there is a question, and maybe, Will, if you have a moment to answer very quickly, there's a question about personal expenses. What is the maximum number of participants of the projects in addition to PI, co-PI, decision maker? There is no maximum number of participants in the project, but there are parameters for budgeting for those personnel expenses. So, Will, can you come in for one quick moment to respond to that point?
Yes, we're actually looking at a maximum of 25% in personnel expenses for the total value of the grants or budgets.
Great, thanks very much, Will. Short and sweet. I will. Coming to the end, I don't see any more really questions or chats or hands up, and we're running out of time, and we will be going through the chat again to make sure that the responses are reflected in the updated FAQ, just to make sure more people have the available answers. Coming to the end, I want to thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you very much for your questions and for listening to us. Please, if you have any follow-up questions or new questions, write us on our Women Rise email account, which is in the call for proposals, and we'll be happy to respond to you, or if you have a specific question for your situation. I also want to thank our donor partners from the Canadian government, SHRC and CIHR. It's really great to have this kind of joint effort to make sure that we have more resources and intellectual kind of backup available for this call and this initiative. So really, thank you so much, and good luck to all of you in your application process. Natasha, le bel mot final.
Les quelques mots en français final. Donc, on vous remercie tout le monde pour votre participation aujourd'hui. C'est un plaisir de vous avoir et d'échanger avec vous. On a eu vraiment beaucoup de questions de votre part. Alors, on est très, très excités de voir tout l'intérêt que vous avez pour l'appel. On remercie nos partenaires aux IRSC, au CRSH. C'est un plaisir vraiment de travailler conjointement dans cette initiative ensemble. Et nous vous souhaitons la meilleure des chances dans le processus d'application. Et nous demeurons disponibles pour répondre à vos questions aussi par courriel si vous avez des questions qui n'ont pas été répondues aujourd'hui et dans les documents que nous allons mettre à jour. Donc, nous vous remercions une dernière fois et au plaisir de vous recroiser dans ce processus et bonne chance. Merci à tous.
Au revoir. Goodbye. Good day, everyone.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.